also look at historically the energy sector, the fossil fuel based energy sector has actually exacerbated the existing gender inequality. Whatever has been there, systemic patriarchal values and inequalities have been increased because of the fossil fuel sector and the way the fossil fuel sector has operated. When we say, for example, when we've had, if you look at the whole central Indian terrain where I have been working for a long time, you will find that women have been dispossessed there, and they've been pushed into a cycle of poverty. So when there were no mines, people depended on forests or land and agriculture for livelihoods. But when there's been land acquisition, when forests have been taken away for developmental activities like setting up mines and thermal power plants, it's the women who've lost out on their access and control to commons, to forests, to water resources, to land, and all of that. And this has had a cyclic, effect on their lives and livelihoods, because even when very few jobs have come through, but even in situations where jobs have come through, it went to the men. So there was always a negotiation of a job in a family. If you look at in the past, when the Coal India Limited negotiated, for jobs, it always went to the men in the family. So women have been actually disempowered in that whole process, and they are stuck in this whole cycle from which then they are not able to come out. One sees that in some ways that the way the fossil fuel sector actually operated, you will find that the large scale renewable energy companies, whether it's been Adani or Renew, these big companies have come in and they've set up large scale renewable energy projects in the country. If you go and study the social and ecological impacts on the ground, it's very, very, sometimes in terms of land, in terms of water, in terms of biodiversity impacts, in terms of looking at the intersections of caste, class, and gender, you find that the impacts are very, very similar. And hence one understands that the impact on women is also going to be very, very similar. From my limited understanding of studying case studies of Pavagada, or looking at Bhima Shankar, wherein, where the Suzlon wind project came long ago. In both these cases, one has seen how women have, been systematically, disempowered in that whole process. So one looks at the whole transition from fossil fuel based energy systems to renewable energy is seen as an economic and technical kind of a transition. It's not seen, whereas one needs to really understand that it's deeply social. It is deeply gendered, this transition. And this transition actually gives us an opportunity to redraw the lines of gender in this whole thing. So that should be one of the core areas in which, so when we are saying that we are shifting from fossil fuels to renewables, here is an opportunity to redraw some of the social and gendered relationships, whether it's on the labor front or otherwise, and empower and not kind of disempower women. So I'll just share very briefly, if I looked at, like when I looked at Pavagada, for example, in Tumkuru district of Karnataka, which is a 13,000 acre solar park, one of the largest in the country, which has got 10 large companies setting up their thing. The livelihoods of people essentially in that region before the solar park came into being was the fact that they were agricultural laborers, especially the Dalits and the lower caste people, but essentially agricultural laborers, goat rearers, sheep rearers. So this was basically their livelihood. But when the solar installation came into being, we found that, like what I have seen on the ground with my interactions with women, especially Dalit women, is that they've been disempowered. So on one hand, agriculture, the whole shift of livelihood happened. So people who were using this land, the large farmers who were engaging in agriculture, stopped engaging in agriculture, which meant that the women who were essentially agricultural laborers lost their livelihood. Now, when they spoke about jobs, we talk about jobs being created, but the jobs being created are very few compared to, say, for example, the fossil fuel industry. We all know that. And the nature of the jobs being created, who takes up those jobs, the nature of the jobs is very technical, maintenance of panels or the kind of.
Let me just quickly interject. When we'll talk more about the nature of the jobs and how disempowered they were in the Q&A question. If I can quickly move around the room to Disha. Thank you, Priya, for your introductory remarks. They have set the stage beautifully for the questions that I'm going to ask. And I'll move on to Disha in the room next so that she could start off with the introductory remarks as well. Thank you, Priya. Yeah, Disha, on to you. Before I receive another nudge from my colleagues.
Thank you, Sahana. Enriching remarks and comments from Priya. I would like to discuss a few aspects about based on my understanding and experience so far. So I do believe that women play a very crucial role in accelerating India's energy transition due to their knowledge and leadership that they demonstrate in a variety of sustainability domains already, like sustainable resource management or driving sustainable practices at various levels, at community level, at household levels, even further women's involvement in the sustainability workforces at including the leadership positions. They have led to positive outcomes and results in energy businesses, climate policies and projects. Yet we know that their low participation in the decision-making processes, workforces, and policy making, they often compound those inequalities and often prevent women from fully contributing to energy and climate-related planning, policy making, and implementation. I was very surprised to know, actually, very recently, I was looking at some information and I saw that women in STEM jobs, the science, technology, engineering, and management jobs, the share of women is only 14%. Even when a large share of women graduate from these courses, about 43% are graduating, but those graduates are not translating into jobs. So that made me, it was a little surprising fact for me. And that revealed that it is very evident that women do continue to face a lot of gender-based challenges in their daily lives. And we know some of these challenges could be common across energy and non-energy sectors, but as a country, we know that there have been, of course, cultural biases and competing priorities that women have to shoulder, and they do face that lack of flexibility in work environments and not enough room or opportunities to grow and upskill themselves within the professional setup that they are in. And I also see that there are hardly any conscious efforts by employers to provide opportunities to women who want to rejoin workforces after taking, a career break. These are just some examples, of formal training or formal employment sectors. Specifically in clean energy, we see that, not hardly any training programs that are designed in a manner that can attract more women participants. For informal sectors, the situation can be very different. The challenges for MSMEs, micro, small, medium enterprises, agricultural, allied sectors, it could be very different kind of challenges. But I strongly feel that bringing sustainability from the margins to the mainstream can only happen when women, along with men, they drive the change, they are involved in bringing about the change. So we also at CEEW, we have an extensive jobs and skills program where we conduct these employment assessment surveys and primary research. And we do find that clean energy sector offers massive potential in the future. But I also believe that to tap this potential in a manner that creates that gender diversity and brings transition to closer to communities, youth, women, it will need informed and concerted efforts from the public, private, and non-government entities alike. And at the same time, the integration of gender lens with the design and implementation of policies, programs, missions, sensitization efforts is key, so that the women are also equal beneficiaries. Like Priya was saying, I mean, not that they should leave, lose out on their occupations, their livelihoods. They should be equal beneficiaries of this transition process that we see is already underway in the country. And
Yeah,
so I would leave it
so
at that at this right now, and I will cover some more aspects in your questions.
thank
Sahana,
you.
thank you.
Thanks, Disha. So, from Priya, what we understood is the systematic disempowerment. And then moving on to Disha, who spoke about the lack of training programs, which could attract more women and incorporating a gender lens in policies, programs, and other ways of participation. We move around the room across to Manjushree now for her opening statements on the subject. Manjushree, take it away.
Thank you, Sahana. Good evening to each one of you attending this discussion. Priya and Disha beautifully provided the background and mentioned about important aspects. So I would say that during 90s, the household electrification rate in India was around 50%, and now it reached almost 100%. During this transitional phase, renewable-based off-grid solutions played an important role. I remember during 2005-6, I was involved in a study in Changthang area of Ladakh, where solar-based off-grid power plant was being installed to provide electricity to the households. I was associated with a study to identify livelihood opportunities for women to enhance their affordability level for electricity. The off-grid initiatives directly or indirectly included women as an important contributor. TERI has a massive program. TERI, the Energy and Resources Institute, has a massive program called Lighting a Billion Lives. This program is still there. About 10 years back, the program had a structure which rented charged solar lanterns in the unelectrified villages or villages with limited connections. And many of the entrepreneurs were women. Similarly, many other off-grid initiatives at village level, particularly solar-based lanterns, solar-based home systems, small off-grids, and improved cook stoves, involved women either as entrepreneur or in other roles such as awareness creators or social marketing agents. Eventually, like we moved towards 100% electrification, and the role of off-grid in communities changed as well. The role of off-grid changed from sole provider of electricity to a backup support. And now the off-grid projects are more prominent towards providing providing power for productive usage, like for irrigation, such as solar power pumps, or another example is of solar looms, which provide power during power cuts. Again, as the women entrepreneurs or self-employed women are very small in proportion, the space of women as users of these off-grid initiatives for productive usage are also limited. The past decade saw a massive change in share of renewable energy in total installed capacities. From the year 2011 to now, this share increased by almost 19%. And with India moving towards net zero emissions, the share of renewable energy in installed capacities are likely to increase many folds. This increase in share of grid interactive renewable power is very much evident, such as there was an increase of 12% from 2019 to 20, while the share of increase of fossil based power was 2%. Now, the share of women in organized sector itself is low, and this representation is even lower, that is about 12% in manufacturing sector. This is reflected in renewable energy sector as well. We need to ponder now, like whether this new structure of renewable based generation are encompassing women in various roles like policy, planning, implementation, and maintenance. And also, are there enough space for women like who do not possess the technical skills or expertise? Now, the requirements in these large and mega renewable energy based power plants are based on expertise, education, and skill level. Since the renewable energy sector has immense potential for growth, it is likely to means it is important to ensure some level of equality in participation of women from the initial phase. There are initiatives as well such as in Maharashtra, Odisha, and West Bengal, state electricity distribution companies involve women in electricity distribution for metering, billing, and repair work. There are exclusive capacity building initiatives at global level which aims to strengthen the capacity and network of women in energy, such as Global Women's Network for
Manjushree,
Energy Transition.
Manjushree, sorry if
Yes.
I could request you to hold on to that thought
Okay,
as
sure,
we
sure.
move on to the next segment. So now, Priya, Manjushree, and Disha, between yourselves, you've sort of very, in a very eloquent way, you have sort of put together the context of the problem, and also you've, to a certain extent, also have gone into the solutions. Whether it's the socioeconomic issues, whether it's the lack of skilling programs, and also the transition between off-grid to larger projects. So on that note, combining the opening remarks, my first question is, where I would request Manjushree to take the lead in this while responding is, when women transition, from off-grid, and home-based solar power projects to the larger projects, what exactly happens in that transition? Where do they lose out? Where do they gain? And at what levels are women employed in the big projects? For example, Disha mentioned these stats on women in STEM. So I'm really curious to understand at what levels are women employed in the big projects as well. So the transition, if you could tell us briefly, what happens in that transition from decentralized to involvement in big projects, and at what levels are they employed in the big projects? Manjushree, if you could take the lead, and I would also request the other participants to also chip in. Yeah. Manjushree, please take it away.
Yes, sure, Sahana. So actually what happens that in case of off-grid initiatives, the scale is much smaller. And in majority of the off-grid projects, like what happens that from the planning phase itself, this gender inclusion is there. For example, like we initiated one project in three states where it was solar multi-utility center. We were actually creating women groups for uh, for some entrepreneurial activities, primarily for agricultural processing, and power was provided through um, solar as well as wind. Again, there are other initiatives like what I mentioned in lighting a billion lives, or where the scale is small, and from the planning stage itself, gender inclusion is there. And also in small scale projects like off-grid projects, there is means very limited requirement of expertise. The majority of the skill trainings are on repairs and maintenance, and also for social marketing in case of solar lanterns or whether it is improved cook stoves. Whereas when we move to mega scale or mega power plants or large scale renewable energy power plants, it is more of a representation of what is happening in similar industries. Women in organized sector is in itself is low. So here the employment is more based on your expertise and skills. So, and also there are other social issues as well. So how many women are trained in STEM, like also Disha has mentioned, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? And even if they are trained, like whether they are willing to take up renewable energy work, and also what about the women who are technically, like they lose out in mega scale project, like mega and large projects. So basically it is somewhere training, capacities, training and education, and also social aspects. Because small scale projects are at decentralized level, it's at village level. Women can reach many, accessibility is much more than, while a mega or large scale project will be in some other place. The distance, there is a distance between generation and point of connection. That's all.
Beautifully put, Manjushree. The differences when you are involved in a small scale project versus a big project. Priya, Disha, would you have any thoughts on this particular question?
So I would second what Manjushree was saying. I think going forward, when we are like India is charting out its transition pathway, I think it should be more decentralized in nature. Like I said, some of the studies that we've done, it shows that decentralized projects are more likely to yield a higher number of jobs, right? For example, rooftop solar, right? Every 4 gigawatts of rooftop solar could create 50,000 jobs. 20 gigawatts worth of microgrid projects, for example, would generate around 110,000 skilled and unskilled jobs both. So and decentralized and geographically spread out. So right now today what we see is most of the large projects coming up in the southern and the western parts of the country. Only 6 to 7 states. But the need is that we look at alternate technologies, small scale applications of renewable energy technologies that can spread, wide out, such that there are local jobs that get created, and in that process, of course, whatever upskilling and training is required, it is imparted through various channels, through school, college curricula. But it's important that we decentralize and we diversify our deployment going forward.
Okay. I saw Priya nodding emphatically on that. Priya, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Manjushree and Disha said. I resonate that. Just wanted to add that, I definitely believe that decentralized renewable energy production at the village and cluster level and distribution at that level itself is what is going to empower larger communities. And in that system, women especially. But also just wanted to add another element of, when we are talking about energy being produced at the decentralized level, at the village and cluster level, who owns that energy system? There's a big question, right? And there women play an important role, in taking on ownership of these systems, these decentralized systems. And that is very important, that you could have models where women cooperatives, women producer companies run these models, because beyond just being workers, beyond just being people who maintain panels and have jobs in an installation, there is the whole question of decision making being in women's hands. There's the whole question of women being owners and leaders in this whole transition. So I just wanted to add that this also needs to translate at that level, wherein women take ownership of our energy systems as we push through these decentralized renewable energy systems, basically.
So, thank you, Priya, for that thought. We've already got some, answers to the solutions that we were looking for. One is, decentralization and spreading it out geographically, diversifying. And what Priya mentioned as well, ownership of the decentralized systems. On that note, Priya, I was curious because you mentioned Pavagada and you've sort of revealed how a clean energy project, how Pavagada in Karnataka has impacted women. And despite these tall claims about inclusivity, I want to know, how tough is it for women to participate in the clean energy transition? And if their non-participation is having a domino impact on the overall societal structure in some in such areas, So what are your thoughts on that, Priya? If you could take a lead on that response, and if others could sort of join in after Priya. Thank you, Priya. Please take it away.
Sorry, I was muted.
Priya, you are on mute. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear now?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, definitely, from the very few ground experiences that I have tried to study in depth, one has understood in the Pavagada model how difficult and challenging it is for the average woman in the village to kind of be part of this whole process. So while on one hand, her livelihood is being snatched away, the systems to run her livelihood. If she, say, for example, she's a sheep rearer or a goat rearer, one has seen in Paugada that they've built a boundary wall across the entire, solar installation, which actually makes grazing grounds out of bounds for her. So which has actually pushed her to walk 5 to 7 kilometers every day, one way to kind of get, take with her cattle to kind of graze them. And in this whole process, she's ended up selling off her goat and sheep because she just can't sustain it. It just doesn't work for her. And the other livelihood, which was basically the agricultural labor livelihood, that has also gone. Now, in terms of the work available in the installations itself, one has seen that there are two different kinds of jobs in which women are engaged. One is, of course, the panel cleaning is one thing which mostly went to men actually, and then there's the other thing of cutting grass. Now, these jobs are not something that comes regularly. It's not like you cut grass for the entire year. You need to cut grass there, right? It's like you're employed for a few weeks or a few months in a year. So basically these jobs, mostly I found that women were engaged in cutting grass. Again, even in that, men were given a different wage and women definitely got a lower wage. So one sees that this was totally replicated. The whatever inequality is there, men were preferred for cleaning panels because there was this understanding that they can climb up and they can do the cleaning better, much better than women. So women were not preferred. There was no equal wage. Also, one saw this companies coming in, and bringing in migrant laborers. One of the interesting things that women spoke about was basically, they said that, earlier we were so free to move around in our villages. Now we have lots of strangers, so we don't let our daughters roam around freely in the villages because there are so many people we don't know. So these companies have, even the men, the men from the locality are not employed. The men from, neighboring districts or even, migrant laborers are basically taken over to do their work. So now there's this whole security aspect. There was, I remember one woman saying that, we've kind of stopped allowing our girls to go out because there was a case where this particular girl fell in love with a migrant laborer. So so what happens at the end is that the society tightens the noose around women. So you are not allowed to go out because there are people and the atmosphere is not safer for you. So in this way, you will find that not just for jobs, there are also social norms that are redrawn, and women have to bear the brunt of all of it in taking these things forward. So that has been a challenge. One has seen this very clearly in say, for example, in Kamudi, where the Adani is set up a large solar plant. We have seen the burden of women increasing because they are ending up buying. You spoke about the domino effect, right? Not only have they lost their jobs, they are ending up buying water now because Adani is illegally extracting water to clean panels. Now the water table has gone down, which means the access to water has gone down. You will find in every household in Kamudi, women buy, there is these structures in which they put, 5 pots. They go and queue with these, these structures in front of the tanker when it comes, and then they buy water. So they have to shell out X amount of money just to buy water for drinking and sanitation purposes. So these are things which become additional burden. All women have to walk and go to the next panchayat and get water free because they can't buy this water, which is being supplied by a tanker. So there are these additional issues which are coming up because, this is new. One has not really gone in depth and studied it, but there are these challenges that are coming, which means, women's access to livelihoods, their access to common grazing grounds, their access to forests have been cut down in some places, like in Bhima Shankar. The boundary wall basically cut off women from going into the forest. The tribal communities were stopped from going into the forest and collecting firewood or collecting, non-timber forest produce, which has impacted the woman's livelihood and, has disempowered her. So there are these challenges which are seen, in cases across now.
So Priya, that was beautifully put, how you sort of describe the security concern, that also comes with these kind of projects, and also the domino effect. Now, Disha and Manjushree, in your experiences, when you do your research, also when you also on your field, when you're talking to local stakeholders, have you also seen similar impacts of these big projects?
Should I start?
Yeah, please go on. Yeah.
Okay. So what Priya said, I agree with that. I remember we were doing some study, which was basically for special economic zone for petrochemical industries. So what happened? All the agricultural land went for industries. So the women who were actually engaged in their own agricultural fields, or they had some other work, so they somehow lost their work. And also the jobs in industries, they required a different skill level. So also not only men were also not properly engaged in those industries. And for women, when they lost their agriculture work, so they had actually somehow many were actually moving towards providing some help, domestic help, to the other townships coming near to those petrochemical industries. So in a way, they somehow they were losing ownership of their own assets, and gradually somehow they women were losing out in many aspects. And also the skill required to get engaged in those industries were very different. They required a different skill level, which demanded women to go out of their villages to some other ITI and all. And the women who were already who crossed certain age were not we're not able to go ahead with that. Like after a certain age, you are losing your own livelihood, and then acquiring new skills, or otherwise you are going for the livelihood which is uh, not as satisfactory as your previous one. And also we see that in case of renewable energy, majority of the women engaged are in in desk offices. So in a way, how suitable it becomes for a woman in this transition phase, who actually loses ownership of her own assets. Thank you.
Beautifully explained, Manjushree. I was wondering if Disha had similar experiences from her work.
Yeah, so thank you, Sahana. I think very provocative, thought-provoking comments which both Priya and Manjushree have shared. Very recently, actually, my team was also on the field, interacting with some communities residing in the vicinity of large-scale solar and wind plants. And of course, I mean, yes, the communities have, shared some of the impacts that they are facing, particularly like Priya was saying, on land and water resources. There have been some, local jobs that have gotten created, for example, taxi services, or, some slightly, well-to-do people in those villages who are supplying water to these plants for cleaning purposes. But however, these benefits have been highly skewed, or not equally distributed amongst various classes of people, various age, again, gender-based, little bit, yeah, similar concerns on, outside labor coming for work, not as many local jobs getting created. So those concerns were there. And therefore I feel the companies, they do talk a lot about all the CSR activities that they undertake, all the sustainability activities that they are mandated to undertake under all of these either United Nations framework, or even the ESG, the environmentally socially responsible activities that they have to undertake. They do discuss a lot about those things. there needs to be something which, actually every people, like all stakeholders, everyone involved in this whole process of development, they need to know how those, spending that the companies are doing, how is it actually, translating into benefits for the local communities. That is one aspect I feel that the communities, the developers, the local, local district officers, for example, they all need to be on the same table to, discuss how this spending is happening and how it is really, going into the welfare of the communities there.
So Disha, you described how there is this gap in our understanding how this spending is actually benefiting local communities, and how it's how to make sense of it also in the way, does it also make women more inclusive, all these CSR related activities and all the spending that happens. On that note, there's one question I thought really like to put you in the spotlight for is, are there any clear estimates about the participation of women in the clean energy sector? Because there are some think tank reports, that have said jobs for women in the clean energy sector have gone down. And going forward, what do you think are the opportunities for women in the clean energy workforce? And how can they carve out a niche for themselves there? We've heard a lot about skills, and you've also mentioned, how Manjushree also mentioned, skill sets are also very different as well. So, taking off from all of that, could you enlighten us on the estimates about women's involvement in the energy sector, clean energy sector, and are the jobs there? Are they have they gone down? And going ahead, how do we pave the road ahead for including more women in the clean energy workforce? Disha, take it away, please.
Yeah, thank you, Sahana. I think there is a lot of lack of gender disaggregated data in renewable, being published by renewable energy companies. So for us also, it has been quite hard in terms of, keeping on contacting every year, contact different companies in the renewable energy space, in the rooftop solar space. Then some of them respond, then some of them don't respond. So we have to rely on, whatever information we are able to gather through our efforts. So I, particularly for, country level disaggregated, gender disaggregated data is quite hard to find. The study that you mentioned in your opening remarks, of course, we carried that study out in around 2018, where we looked at the solar rooftop sector specifically, and saw that the share of women stood at 11% in 2018. And although it was higher than other energy related sectors in the country, like coal, oil and gas, but it was relatively lower than other technology service sectors like IT or communications. And most of these jobs were, like Manjushree was saying, office-based jobs. And this particular, this 11% was also, less than the global average of, global average of women working in the renewable sector, which stood at 32%. Also, in some of the estimates, like we've been doing, annual surveys again to see how many jobs have gotten created or will get created with the country's stated ambitions. And we did saw that, we did see that there was a drop during the COVID pandemic in terms of, the new jobs that were that got created during that COVID pandemic year. Almost like 48% drop in the new job creation, as compared to the pre-pandemic year. I mean, of course, there is like I said, there's massive employment potential that is projected now, because we have in our COP26 announcements, we've committed to 500 gigawatts of non-fossil based capacity. But I think today, where we stand in the senior management or leadership positions, in Indian energy companies, we only at 8.4%, where we talk about, equality, diversity. I think in the next, this decade, we should at least try that there is, from this 8.4%, we should be reaching, 50-50. So, equal representation of women and men in senior roles. And of course, entry-level roles, we need to attract more women participation and retain them as well. So I think how, to your next question, Sahana, on how, women can, or employers and women, the people who are looking to enter into the workforce, they can, what kind of opportunities exist. I think there is a big market out there on how we can integrate the decentralized renewable energy applications with the, women-led enterprises. So today we know, according to the Ministry of Small Medium Enterprises, we know 20% of micro enterprises in the country are women-owned. Now, if these women-owned enterprises get access to decentralized renewable energy or clean energy, it has a big, there's a big opportunity to improve their productivity and also reduce the drudgery levels. So, for example, linking our livelihood targets with, through these government schemes, financing innovations, and capacity building efforts, and DRE-based innovations, such as, sewing machines or milk chillers, or even like textile industry. These already, these applications have actually demonstrated the potential, to improve livelihoods and productivity. And there needs to be key enablers like adopting alternate ways to assess the credit worthiness of these women business owners, basically. So how we can increase the investments in these women-led enterprises, because again, like you said, this has a ripple or a domino effect, because women-led enterprises or women teams, they tend to go out and employ more women in their team. So this has a domino effect in terms of the increasing the share of women in the labor force or the formal work sector. And then of course I think in the urban space where we're talking about cities, even towns, cities, where I feel that there is a much more awareness today when it comes to impact of climate change. And women and men both, actually, they are going out and pursuing careers in science, in technology, in public policy, for example, in field work, right? And I think there is a lot out there in terms of opportunities, forums, or internship opportunities which young students can avail of. India is a home to more than 600 think tanks today, several startups that are coming up in even in the energy space. So I think there is through social media now, of course, so many social media platforms are there. I think there is a lot of opportunity there for young girls and women to sort of try and reach out to a network of people. There are like I said, there is Women in Renewable Energy Association. There are different initiatives like Women in Sustainability, which I am co-chairing as part of CEEW. So there are initiatives where girls could reach out for internship opportunities or some kind of association in some field projects, for example, to gain awareness of these clean energy solutions and opportunities, and then sort of broaden their horizons to possible career pathways going forward for them. So yeah, that's what I would like to share with you.
Lovely, Disha, and the way you've sort of mentioned the figures, which are quite stark, 48% drop and then 8.4%. So those figures kind of stood out. And then you've sort of gone on to really express, how there are small steps that are being taken, and how that can sort of really fulfill the massive potential that we've been talking about, that women have in this sector. But I would also like to hear what are Priya's and Manjushree's thoughts on this. What do you think about these networks particularly that are there, and how can women and young girls tap into these networks? Have you yourself seen women on the ground also sort of use this awareness that's there, or use other forms of networking to sort of skill themselves or to sort of make inroads in this energy transition? Priya and Manjushree, whoever, if you want to respond on this.
Okay, I have okay, in my limited understanding, I've not really seen the average woman in the village actually being part of these networks. In places where, say, for example, like we've seen models, right? Like Selco, going out and establishing a model, and in that space, you will find that there is an active element of trying to bring women into this ambit, skill them, upskill them, and get them engaged in this process. But the challenge, I think, is that how much of this is out there for anybody to just say that, okay, I need to, I want to do this, and this space is available for me, to take on this thing. I've personally, I've not come across, unless there are, say, for example, microfinance enterprises, or organizations or NGOs playing a very proactive role in that space.
Right. Manjushree, would you like to add something?
Yes. Um, uh, Disha and Priya, they have like beautifully put together the points. So one thing definitely I agree with Disha, that there is really dearth of data on women in clean energy, particularly in case of India. But however, about your question on networks, like I already mentioned that there are like focused networks for women in clean energy, such as like Global Network for Women in Energy Transition. They have a mentor-mentee program where they link one young professional anywhere across the world with a like experienced woman in energy sector. So what happens, this helps in building a mutual experience base between mentor and mentee, and it's across like various aspects like clean cooking, energy transition, or renewable energy, uh, power plants, like across various aspects of renewable energy. So these type of networks exist. And also at village level, if we see, like initially we used to means we um, for example, like about 2 years back, I was uh, in Nagaland for a study for clean energy technologies, like how women are ready to take up clean energy as source of livelihood, like small things. So there we identified that women were quite interested in taking up, and networks already exist, like in terms of the cooperative or self-help groups, or the village groups. Like every state has different structures, so it is up to like how we put like these networks into promoting or you know uh, enhancing access to clean energy. So in many cases, the rural networks were used to promote clean energy. So it depends, it changes from place to place as well.
Okay. Thank you, Manjushri. You've sort of painted a picture of how these networks also change from place to place, which was an important context. Now, from the conversations that we've had so far, I've realized that there's also research gaps. What Priya said about the impacts of the economic impacts, involving women, of these big projects, that's sort of understudied. Then of course, about Manjushri speaking about the age, the skill sets are also very different. So when you reach a certain age, maybe these are not some of the jobs that would be given to you as a woman. And also, Disha mentioned about disaggregated data. Where is that data set that we really want to rely on? So, combining all of the points and observations that you've made, my question to all of you is, if you could identify what are the how are these research how can these research gaps be plugged? What are the ways in which we can sort of bridge these research gaps? And bridging these research gaps, how would that enable policymakers to also see women as an integral part of these projects, not just a charity case, but that they have to be here because they are adding value to this. So how can we plug these kind of research gaps that you've highlighted, and how can plugging these research gaps enable more women to join the clean energy workforce? So if any of you if you would like to sort of take a lead on this, any one of you.
Okay, I'll maybe just start thinking aloud. So uh, I'm part of a larger project, which is a study on socio-ecological impacts of large-scale renewable energy projects, only large-scale renewable energy projects in Australia, Germany, and India. And one of the things we 3 years, almost 2.5 years into the study, one of the things we are realizing is that renewable energy, large scale renewable energy has come only in the last this last decade is when, you've had these big solar plants and, wind parks and stuff being set up. So, this is just the beginning, it's to expect that, we'll actually know what the impacts of all of this is too early, as we get into the whole issue, you'll take, so time is a factor, whatever we see today is this is a relatively new source of energy. Every day things are changing, right? Technology is changing. Things are going to change on the ground as well. But from whatever we've seen that, if renewable energy goes in the same direction as the fossil fuel, it's going to hit a certain roadblock, and we need to avoid that. We are all advocates of renewable energy in the interest of climate change. So one sees that, there is a time period issue in this whole thing, and that is why there is a lot of data gap, whether it's on water, whether it's on the social impacts, whether it's on management of the waste that is going to be generated from this, whether it's looking at, say, different kinds of models, the Pavagada model is a land lease model, the Tamil, the Madurai, model is basically a land grab model. You will have a land acquisition model. So there are different kinds of models. They've all just started playing out. There are stories out there. There is some bit of research that has happened, but I think we are in that nascent stage trying to understand. Right now, a lot of this thing is pushed by the thing of, oh, this is green, this is great, let us welcome it. If you look at the entire regulatory system in the country, it is totally in favor of renewables. You don't need, there is no centralized regulatory system, unlike in fossil fuel system, where, you have an EIA process, you have a process of getting clearances, which are tightened at one level. Here, you don't even have that process. The thing is that if it is a green energy, if it is a renewable energy project, please give it clearance, give it a single window clearance, because it has the green tag to it. So we need to understand that, these are there are challenges. But we are in the process of trying to understand some of these challenges, understand some of these models. And when the Pavagada model came of land lease, we actually thought that it's a great model. At least it doesn't take away land from communities. But then you dive deeper into the model itself, and then you realize that maybe it's a model that works better for the companies, because they don't have to invest upfront. Their capital investment is very low. The farmers, or the farmers have actually entered into a bargain where they don't have a good negotiating capacity once the lease period is over. So these are things that we are still trying, learning and understanding and getting to know. That's my understanding. There's definitely a huge data gap. There needs to be more research on various aspects, including especially the nuanced aspect of women. and the way they are kind of where they find themselves in this whole system, are they better off? Is the whole transition just a just transition? Does it enable us to kind of address some of the historical social inequalities that have existed in the system? Does it give us an opportunity to challenge some of those historical inequalities? These are all questions around which we need to kind of delve more deep now and start talking about them.
Speaking of delving more deeply, Disha, I see that you wanted to say something. Could you go on?
I wanted to quickly add that I think as an immediate step, the government must mandate self disclosure by companies. Companies in the sustainability sector or in the renewable energy sector, they must self disclose, their the employment, the ratios, how many women to men in what, across what jobs and roles. So this should be a self disclosure for sure. The other thing I think, in the exercises that are conducted, the surveys and the census exercises that are conducted at the national as well as subnational level, there is much scope to integrate some gender sensitive, questions and survey formats, because these are exercises that are happening at a large scale and they are covering almost the entire population of the country. So definitely, I think there is a need for all the research organizations maybe to come together and provide this kind of input to the ministries of statistics and data, the ministries involved in such data collection exercises. Yeah.
Okay, so basically self-disclosure of companies, sort of letting us know what are the ratios, men versus women in their employment on these projects, and also include gender sensitive questions in the surveys, so that they could feed into that data hole that we are seeing right now. And on that note, what are the skill sets that you think, like you've mentioned that there are very different skill sets that are needed in the renewable energy sector. So specifically, what are the skill sets that you really need to prep yourself if you really want to be a part of this workforce?
Yeah, I think Manjushree wants to say something.
No, you please go ahead.
Yeah,
please go ahead.
So I think two very different kinds of buckets that we look at. One, of course, on the project construction, delivery, commissioning, implementation side, and the other, of course, is more sort of corporate jobs that we are looking at in business roles, in management roles, in engineering roles. So, of course, I think as we see, women do take up a lot of these courses, engineering, technology courses. However, we don't see as much women participating in eventually these jobs and roles that are created in the workforce. So that there I feel, of course, there's a lot of role to be played by the employers in making the workspaces and the work conditions conducive to the needs of the women. So they need to understand what would help retain or attract more women in these corporate jobs. So that's on that side. But on the ground based roles, right, field work, for example, there are training programs, but like I said, they are not designed to attract women. So for example, Government of India does have this program called Surya Mitra program, where they train solar technicians, diploma holders. So till now, between 2015 to 2021, more than 78,000 trainees have benefited from this program. Now, how much benefited, of course, one can debate, but these people have participated in this program. But out of the 78,000, very few women. And again, they have not put out the gender disaggregated data that, year on year, how many men, how many women. So that data is not available. Now, we were speaking with some of these training providers, right, trying to evaluate what might be the gaps in these programs and how it can be strengthened going forward. So again, training providers and even, the trainees themselves, beneficiaries themselves, Again, the women, of course, they do want, some of them, they do face barriers in families. They cannot travel and attend these in-house. So this is a residential training program where you have to stay, in-house. So they face that barriers. They cannot go and attend these programs. So now, of course, with the help of technology, can our training programs be designed to given in an online fashion, or can these be made more decentralized? Can they reach the village level? Can they reach the panchayat level with the gram panchayat sarpanches of the villages? With mobile training centers, for example. I have seen some demonstration units of mobile training centers where these mobile units actually go from village to village and give some hands-on training. So can these kinds of upgradations be made to the delivery format and the design format, such that these efforts and the budget that the government is spending on providing this kind of facilities, they actually reach the women and the girls in the villages.
So reaching, to women is a key area that has been identified. Upgradation in delivery formats. Manjushree, your thoughts on this issue in general.
Like now we have a long way to go, like with net zero emission targets, as well as like with huge renewable energy targets. Like there is tremendous scope of renewable energy based generations. Now, since we are still at means at initial stage, I would say we are talking about net zero emission. So from this stage only, we need to like plan so that it is gender inclusive. For this, it is very important that we identify the skills required for this industry, and like how we make it gender inclusive. There may be many ways, or we can structure the like how we proceed. We can, for example, like in distribution, also quoted example like women are engaged in electricity distribution as in billing roles and metering roles, as well as in small repair roles. And till now, those the skills where on renewable energy means technologies such as repair of solar lanterns or installation of solar lanterns. Those type of skills were imparted to the women, like the trainings which were mostly women centric. They used to have these type of skills. Now we need to diversify the like means skill trainings. For example, we need to prepare women also, like we need to impart women also for the grid connected renewable energy jobs. This is one, like it is at this stage only, it is very important to have the skill requirements, as well as like expertise requirement, and also like diversify the existing training models. And through government, as Disha has already mentioned, that there is Surya Mitra, there is Green Skill Council that gives that imparts skill trainings to, like, but gender disaggregated data is not there. So this is there, and also along with this, the we can we need to encourage more women in STEM, and those who enter STEM streams, they may be encouraged to join this power sector. One thing that I observed, there was Reliance power plant was installed in early 2010 or 11. I forgot the year. And during that time, we were doing some study, like we were associated with some study. So what happened that, like, in means there were about maybe there were 50 men, like new recruits, but there were only one or two. This is also because women, like, so this is also because of the, the like uh, the place where these power plants are installed. They are not actually in the city, or they are away from city, or some in other locations. So it is one thing is that the woman needs to be prepared, and for these things there is requirement of a strong network or cohort, so that each one of us can like now take courage or understand the nitty-gritties of this sector from those who are already in the sector, from the women who are already in the sector.
Okay. Thank you, Manjushree, for enlightening us on, how, that we need to really plan ahead. Now, before we move on to take questions from the audience, Priya, just quickly, because you worked on the ground, on the socio-economic impacts. I really was curious, in terms of skills, when we talk of corporate sector women in STEM, but when we talk of skills on the ground, for these women in rural areas, how does that translate into? What are skills according to them, and is there also an eagerness in them to sort of skill themselves up, to be employed in these sectors?
I think definitely, when we look at it, we need to look at it so one, of course, category is the, are the engineering students, the science, mathematics, technically, upskilled women in the country, and how that they will be mainstreamed into the renewable energy workforce. For that, I think the renewable industry needs to kind of create a culture of inclusivity, because inclusion will not come automatically, especially in a society that's extremely gendered. Inclusion doesn't come automatically. We have to understand that there is a systemic problem that needs to be addressed. Unless we address that problem systemically, and there are multiple ways of addressing that system. It could be through, government trying to do trainings. It could be at a policy level where the government sets new labor standards, for example, which is going to be different from the existing standards. So there are certain policy level things, or there needs to be some things that are made mandatory from the government's side to enable this move to happen, because patriarchy is not something that came yesterday, right? It's been there for thousands of years, and it won't go overnight. So we to sit here and think that this whole upskilling, this whole inclusivity, will happen automatically is something that's foolish. That won't happen. So we need to do something proactively to enable this whole thing to happen. So there's something that the government can do. There is something that the RE industry needs to proactively do. I think when we are talking about upskilling, there's the category of engineers and scientists and people like that. There's also the category of people that I basically engage with, which are totally people who are uneducated, people who don't do, have no, they've led very simple lives, depending on forests, on land, on water resources for their lives and livelihoods. Now, when we talk about them joining this workforce, what kind of work is available for them, we need to kind of realistically look at it. When we are snatching away a set of livelihoods for a set of people, then what are we thinking that the entire large population that was engaged in a, say, natural resource based livelihood will totally automatically shift into the renewable based livelihood? I'm not sure that there is that much of opportunity there, and that is a concern. So maybe the option would be to create alternative livelihoods for these people, right? Because if you look at transition, for example, you are looking at the unorganized sector, for example, in Jharkhand transitioning, the jobs are being created in the southern states, whereas the people who are going to lose their jobs, or lose their livelihoods are in another state. So you can't imagine that these people will automatically fit into their shoes. That doesn't happen like that. So even when we say that we want them to be upskilled, we need to have a clear plan, a blueprint of, okay, if I am taking away livelihoods of X number of people, what am I bringing there to as an alternative, to support these people, rather than pushing them into a cycle of poverty, which they will eventually go into because you've snatched away their livelihoods. So I think that, of course, the government needs to play a very proactive role in looking at what that transition actually looks like on the ground. which is not something that's happening today in the country. When we are talking about transition from fossil fuel to the renewables, but what is the actual cost of that transition? It's not just organized sector workers. They are, I think, going to be the best, like whether it's women or in that sector, they're going to still have a negotiating capacity. What happens to the unorganized people? What happens to the families that depend on these unorganized sector workers whose livelihoods have been in natural resource based management things? So I think we need to totally relook at that paradigm and say that, and accept the fact that maybe all the jobs will not be created in the decentralized renewable energy sector. We need to also parallelly look and have a plan for alternative livelihoods for people, include, and women will be at the forefront of taking on that livelihoods. Of course, there is the CSR thing that should go on, where they upskill women in these regions. I have seen in Pavagada, say for example, the younger college going girls, they are happy to get trained in technically, and get jobs in these solar parks in whatever form. They are not getting these opportunities. But what about their mothers? What happens to their aunts who were agricultural laborers or sheep rearers? What kind of skill set can be built in them? And it is not impossible. We've seen that their skill sets can be developed to incorporate them. But are there so many jobs? If not, then can we look at alternative livelihood options for these women? Because that's important to also look at it from that frame.
Thank you, Priya, for adding another dimension to that discourse on skills. Moving on to the questions that we've received from audience. So Anu Lama wants to know, and this is something which is going to add on to what we've just been discussing. The question is, are women ready to take this renewed role and decision-making position, especially in decentralized energy solution deployment context? How much does social context, position of women, and their education support or discourage this transition? Are women ready to take this renewed role and decision-making position? And what are the social context, positions of women, and their education, and how does that support or discourage this transition?
Uh, uh,
Please go on,
is
Manjushree.
it fine? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
please go on.
actually, it depends on the, uh, you know, socially, like how women are like raised. That is also that's also one thing. For example, as I already mentioned, that when we did a study in Nagaland, the women were really willing to take up entrepreneurship in case of for renewable based products. And similarly, we observed a very good response in state of Himachal Pradesh. But many times, what happens that socially, though women have aspiration, but many times they are not like willing to express their interest. And also sometimes, like if these entrepreneurship models, they need some investment from their side, uh, maybe they are not able to invest. They don't have the decision making capacity to invest in the business. So it actually depends, it varies from context to context. So that is there.
Okay, so there's a it varies from context to context. What you mentioned, especially about cultural barriers as well. Disha and Priya, do you also feel the same?
So I kind of, my take is, so
Okay,
I would
so
like to kind of,
I'll also move on to the next question. Sure. Go on, Priya. Go on.
I would like to turn this question into, instead of asking if women are ready to take on this renewed role and decision making, is the society ready for to allow, or are we enabling women to take on this decision making renewed role? This new role is the question we should ask ourselves, rather than kind of putting the onus on the woman to kind of take on that role. I think we should definitely look at, are we as a society which is extremely gendered, you know are we enabling women to take on this role? And that is where all the solution also lies, I think, because this whole role change has to be part of the larger design, right? So it will, for example, involve not just skilling the women workforce, but from you begin from there, you go on to actually the RE companies providing an enabling atmosphere for women to bring their children to work, to be able to balance their work and life, looking at the roles they play at their homes, how can they balance their jobs. So there are all a wide range of things that we as a society, or we, as enablers, need to put in place before we ask women, if are you ready. She's ready, she'll get ready only if that enabling atmosphere is there. So I think one needs to kind of turn this whole table on the other side and say, yes, women are ready, but are we providing that enabling environment for women? No, we are not. So somewhere we need to kind of put in place a lot of policies, a lot of things which will enable women to take this leadership role. Women are very capable of taking decisions. Like, for example, when we talk about investment, it's just that she doesn't have access to capital, she doesn't have access to resources. A man is able to take those decisions because he has the access, and historically he's been geared and brought up in a particular mindset, set able to take those risks. If he takes those risks and fails, nobody judges him. That's not the case with women. So we need to kind of put everything in the larger context of this patriarchal society, and then find solutions to this whole problem.
Right. So basically, flipping the question, on its head, and sort of bringing out that, yeah, I mean, these are deep-rooted patriarchal norms that we should be sort of looking at, instead of questioning, are women ready to take on this renewed role? That's the message that we are getting for now from our panelists. And the other question by Mayank Agarwal is, in fossil fuels based projects, we have the whole system of DMF and unions, but nothing of that sort is there in the renewable sector. Should we look at some mechanisms of that kind to ensure that there is some welfare program for different stakeholders, especially women? Do you think there's a need to look at similar mechanisms like DMF and unions within the renewable energy sector, so that it could also benefit women? Disha, Priya,
Yeah,
Manjushree,
so I think,
who would like to go on the spotlight?
yeah, I can attempt to answer that. Just before I answer this question, I'd quickly like to add on the previous question, Sahana, on a recent research that we did, and it found that most of the women entrepreneurs in the clean energy sectors, they are first timers. So they often find it quite challenging to access, say, funding, different sources of finance, and even understand the government policies and regulations. So again, there is a need that government, while it is offering some of these products, or services, or making some efforts to reach or enhance the reach of their policies and programs, they need to integrate the gender lens in those policies and programs, such that either there are certain specific support groups or helplines that they create for such women and entrepreneurs and enterprises. So that was one thing. The other thing, I think, is how employers themselves can be more responsible in recruitment, in how they recruit, and of course, like, the kind of flexibility and environment that they provide. I think in the last 1.5 years, pandemic has changed a lot of things. Now people are quite comfortable with online mode of working. So in a way, it has I know that there have been job losses, but in a way, in terms of how employers view their workforce and the productivity levels, I think it has made a paradigm shift. Of course, I mean, it is not possible in field jobs, but the kind of jobs that you and me are involved in, I think there is a paradigm shift, and employers are much more comfortable in allowing you to, work for certain days from home, and you are in that position to somehow a little bit relatively manage your work and home responsibilities, which was not the case earlier, because there were like very stringent norms, like you have to come to office, you have to be there for 8-9 hours, stuff like that. So on that, on Mayank's question, I think because renewable energy industry is relatively, as compared to fossil fuel industries, relatively nascent. So larger scale projects have only started coming up, say from say 2014, 2015 onwards, and larger companies have also started emerging through these competitive bidding processes that happen in the sector. So I think there's still probably some time for the workforces or the people, the employees to be a little more organized, some kind of these kinds of welfare programs. Of course, there's a lot of I think lot of discussions and focus on the sustainable development goals, and how these companies, more and more companies actually want to become these ESG compliant companies. So I think there is a lot of scope going forward, as we continue to deploy more number of projects. I think I go back to what my earlier thought was, that there should be, those responsibilities should be imposed on the companies, to reveal or to submit, in some kind of formats which are verifiable, to submit the kind of activities that they are undertaking for welfare, of their own employees and for the people affected.
Okay. Thank you, Disha, for elaborating on that more. Priya or Manjushree, would you have points to add on this? Would you like to take a stab in responding to this question?
No, I agree with Dish.
On Mayank's question, Manjushri.
No, please go ahead, Priya.
Priya, go ahead, and then we'll follow up with Manjushree. Please go ahead, Priya.
So I again, as Disha said, it's this industry is quite new, but my personal thinking is that in the capitalist system that we operate in, where we have these large scale projects coming up, big investments, big multinational, national corporations investing in this. In I think there's always the need to organize. Workers everywhere should be organized. Is the baseline for me. Because there is always the need to hold the capitalists and the corporations accountable. And unless you're organized, the accountability definitely is going to be a challenge. So I would totally be for just like in the fossil fuel sector, where you have organized trade unions working. I would definitely go say that in any sector, just like any other sector, the renewable sector also should have organized workers, so that they are able to kind of bargain better with about their rights, and hold the RE industry to a certain standard, basically, whether it's environmental standards or labor standards, or social standards of engagement, I think.
Yeah, gaining a bargaining chip, basically. And Manjushree, what were you going to say on that?
So definitely I agree with both Priya and Disha, that there is a need for welfare, and also like women, like still this renewable energy industry is pretty new. It's nascent. So it's definitely going to have a structured format for welfare as well. So however, representation of women is less, and definitely um, it's going to help. And another point is that, like, we are talking about large scale projects as mega projects, large projects, but also there are small projects, smaller projects. Women per se, like, it is difficult to get loan or bank loans and all those things. So not only welfare at that level, or unions at that level, in for after the industry is created, but also uh, particularly for women like who are initiating the initiating uh, any enterprise, renewable based enterprise, as such that it is difficult to get loan for renewable based industries, particularly small. And even if it's a woman is associated, or it is woman ownership is there, so it becomes even more difficult. So not only at that level, but also at a different level.
Thank you, Manjushree. And on that note, if we are to recap what we've been discussing so far, we've been asking ourselves, are we enabling women? And what we've realized is there's still a long way to go, but there are small steps that have been taken, and but these steps need to sort of percolate to all levels at which women, want to be, working in this sector. Then there's of course research and data gaps which needs to be plugged, and planning ahead and attracting women. These are some of the solutions that we've identified in sort of closing this gender gap. And at the close, I would like to say, please take a look at our clean energy series. You can follow up on all these discussions in the kind of stories that we've done. We have addressed some of these issues, and we are going to address more of these issues. More interesting storylines are going to come up. So follow our social media channels. Thank you all for attending the webinar today. And loads of thanks to Disha, Priya, and Manjushree, the terrific trio who's been with us for the past hour and a half, sort of really brainstorming, what's keeping us ahead in this game. And also not just brainstorming, but also coming out with some tangible solutions, that they're also trying to sort of work their way around the barriers that they're trying to at least address in the work that they do, whether it's the corporate sector, whether it's women in STEM, or whether it's at the grassroots. So thank you, Disha, Priya, and Manjushree, for being with us. And thank you all the attendees for your time, which is of extreme value. Thank you, and have a great day, all of you.